from the AIBotShow.com. It's the AI Bot Show podcast with me, Carl Franklin, and Brian McKay. Hey, guess what? It's the AI Bot Show podcast. I'm Carl Franklin from AppVNext. That's Brian from Ouster. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Carl.
So not a lot of news this last week, right? It was kind of quiet.
Yeah, not a whole lot to cover.
Yeah, just...
we should probably get into it.
Yeah. All right. So the obvious elephant in the room is the OpenAI Shakeup. What happened?
Yeah, that's the big one. Other news happened during this, believe it or not. And the main thing I want to cover is what this means for devs, but also the entire story seems to be emerging now. So let's just talk about what this is, what happened, what it means for devs.
Yeah.
So what happened? All right. So Sam Altman, who's the face of this AI revolution we're in and responsible for raising $13 billion in funding for OpenAI, was abruptly fired by the board with very little explanation.
Right.
A 72-hour revolt followed, which culminated in 730 of OpenAI's 800 employees threatening to quit if the board didn't reverse that.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was actually Ilya Sutskever, I'm probably butchering that name, who is one of the best researchers in this topic in the world.
Right.
He was actually on the board and voted to remove Sam just days before. So he reversed course.
Yeah.
So as of now, as of yesterday, Altman's back as CEO and most of the board has been fired. And it seems as though we're likely back to the status quo, but with Sam Altman having even more power and maybe Microsoft as well. Yeah. And here's an important note, okay, as we get deeper into this. Just remember that during that 72-hour revolt, the board apparently approached Anthropic's CEO and offered him the CEO job with the idea of merging the two companies. That's important for understanding the larger story.
Yeah, I'll bet.
They approached a few people, but it's really important to understand that they approached Anthropic. They're going to come up again.
So just to get back to the kerfuffle, the board seriously misjudged the popularity within the company of Sam Altman. So do you point the finger at the board for, being a little too aggressive or whatever? Or were they misinformed? Or where do you think the truth lies in this big mess?
Well, we can talk about where the board was likely coming from. It definitely seems like this was executed with a lack of experience. They didn't do this right. They didn't produce evidence or present any kind of case that people could get behind. They just said that he wasn't transparent enough and then never really clarified that. They still haven't actually clarified it, but the New York Times and other people are reporting on this and digging into it more. So we kind of know what happened. The question is, how did it happen? Which is kind of what you're getting at there. So OpenAI is a strange company. They are a for-profit company, but it's majority owned by OpenAI Inc., which is a nonprofit.
Okay.
Therefore, it has a nonprofit board. All right. And the board's duties are not really financial. The charter says our primary fiduciary duty is to humanity. And
yeah, right.
It's all about long-term safety. Yeah. Well, there was actually an article that I read during my research from, I want to say it was from October, where some large news outlet, will link to it, was asking the question whether this is important or not and kind of saying it doesn't seem like it is. It actually is. It seems like it's important.
Yeah. Pay no attention to that board behind the curtain.
Yeah. So we'll link to the charter. But the bottom line is that the board is all about enforcing this mission for humanity. And so why did they do this? All right. So reputable sources are painting an increasingly clear picture that this was about AI safety. There are 3 members of the board who likely believed that Altman had strayed from the mission of safety and had become too focused on acceleration and profit.
And in all of this, I haven't heard any real accusations of violations of safety, maybe because that in itself would be a violation of safety. But does anybody have any idea what he may have or have not done to warrant that response from the board?
I think they just generally feel like he's got his foot on the gas and it's not going to work it's not aligned with what they're thinking long term. They want to slow way down. And let's talk about the safety and deceleration people and where they're coming from, so we can kind of understand what they're thinking.
Okay, sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the crux of it.
Yeah, so when you talk to researchers, safety is a big concern in the research space. They're always talking about alignment and making sure that we create AI that is aligned with human interests and safety.
Yeah.
And there's a whole spectrum of takes on this. On the far end, you've got these AI doomers who believe that this technology is just too dangerous to pursue at all, and that we should kind of drop it.
Right.
And then a little bit further along there, the deceleration folks who think we should hit the brakes. And I think where they're coming from is they want to give governments time to metabolize the scope of the risk and create treaties so that we can pause the development on super intelligent AI in particular.
Right.
And they also tend to believe that open source is a safer path forward for all of this technology. And they're quick to point out that OpenAI is not open. So part of OpenAI's mission is actually to make sure that this technology is not centralized, but a lot of the critics of them say they are on a path to making it very centralized because they're not open and they're in the lead. Okay. And then there are accelerationists on the other extreme who believe we should move as quickly as possible, even if it causes some societal chaos. And they say, when they're debating with the deceleration people, the safety people, they say, we can't really slow down because if the West slows down, other countries like China, maybe, who care less about philosophy, will just pass us. And there's a whole ongoing debate about that.
Yeah.
With a lot of people actually in the middle, and these extremes kind of like very loud on the corners.
I'm always concerned when I hear that argument. It's almost like if we don't build a big bomb, we're going to be victims of those who do, right? And so therefore, with that logic, every nation in the world should have a nuclear weapon. You know what I mean?
Well, that's not the only outcome of that thought process. With nuclear bombs, we have been in a mode of trying to contain the proliferation of them. And some countries really want them, like North Korea. And, we try to stop them from getting it. And there's viruses and all kinds of things going on. I think they are thinking of it in those terms, though, of whoever has this is going to have a big advantage if maybe more importantly, if somebody irresponsible makes one, who knows what it will do.
Right.
Will it be controllable? For a long time, the conversation has been about we're going to make super intelligent AI. How do we make sure that we create something that is aligned with humanity's interests? That's what it comes down to. And so slowing down is what they say the answer should be to that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to weigh in. I'm in the middle somewhere.
So I was listening to the New Yorker Radio Hour podcast, and they were interviewing Geoffrey Hinton, who's the guy who invented neural networks and all of that. And he is very concerned about the rise of AI.
He's a doomer.
Yeah, he's a doomer. Exactly. Yeah. AI doomer. But even if you're not an AI doomer, you should probably listen to this podcast with Geoffrey Hinton, because he has a perspective that's counter to the popular sentiment. And that's always a good thing, right? It's always a good thing to listen to. You may not agree with him, but it does give you a different perspective.
Yeah. These are all very intelligent, brilliant people in many cases who have very different takes on it. So it's an ongoing debate. I'll tell you who is on the safety side actually, I think OpenAI is on the safety side as well. But so getting back to why this happened. Consider this timeline, okay? And a lot of this comes from this New York Times article about the board fight. We'll link to that. So in 2020, the co-founders of Anthropic broke off from OpenAI. They were executives, a bunch of them at OpenAI. They broke off and formed their own company, and they were citing disagreements on safety and governance and OpenAI's increasingly commercial direction. So already 3 years ago, that happened. Okay. And last month, board member Helen Toner co-published a paper where she was critical of OpenAI and praised Anthropic's continued focus on safety. And if you know anything about this, it's a big deal when a board member is critical of a company in public.
Yeah.
So Altman confronted her, and it sounds like he was trying to get her removed from the board. But Ilya sided with her, and this coup happened. Then they actually approached Anthropic about their CEO becoming the CEO of OpenAI and then doing a merger back with the people, the decelerationist who left. So she's definitely, I mean, like if you look at her background, she's definitely a deceleration person.
Yeah.
Ilya is the head of OpenAI's super alignment group, where they'd promised to put a really substantial portion of their money into alignment and safety and automating more of that. So you can kind of see what happened here. This seems to me that it's clearly about safety and this debate. So very interesting. I can't wait to watch the movie. I wonder who will play Sam Altman.
Yeah. I was at a dinner a couple of nights ago up in Boston with a bunch of Scrum people. And it's a long story. That's not important. But, you know, everybody was like, hey, what's the deal with OpenAI? I heard about the CEO and this and that. And, you know, somebody made the comment of, I've never even heard of Sam Altman. And I said, well, yeah, nobody really has until he came and did the keynote at their first conference, right? And that's it. They've only been around for a year. And, you know, so he hasn't been in the news because, you know, there hasn't been any salacious things that have happened, but now everybody knows who he is.
Yeah. He seems like a pretty mellow guy from his public persona so far. And, you know, he's an interesting dude because he was already a billionaire when this happened and he doesn't have any equity in OpenAI and he doesn't take a salary.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. He said that to Congress. They were a little surprised by that too when they asked him how much money he's making. And he said, not a dime. That's not his actual words, but he did tweet right after this happened something to the effect of, you know, if I just start running my mouth, they could go after me for the full value of my stock.
Yeah, that's right.
Which there is not. So to his credit, he did not run his mouth. So.
I did hear that, but I didn't understand it. And now I do. So that's the deal. This is what you get for listening to the AI Bot Show podcast, folks.
Now you understand.
You get the real story.
The big thing here is, what does this mean for developers like us, right? So as a CTO, I had to send out a memo to my whole company about, hey, we're building with this. I'm sure you're worried. You know, what does it mean if the worst happens to OpenAI or they become less stable?
Yeah.
And my take was that there wasn't a really big risk because Azure, who we already use for all of our hosting and other things, they have their own OpenAI instances that are just distributed in data centers everywhere. As far as I know, that's totally isolated from OpenAI's operations. And we can switch to them with no problem. The only problem is that the quotas are lower. So, you know, instead of 300,000 tokens that we have today, we would be going to 40,000 tokens per minute. But you can get around that too by signing up for a whole bunch of instances in different regions and round robining your calls. So
that was kind of like your backup strategy, your hedge fund, if you will.
Yeah, that was my disaster plan. Is we could just use, you know, I doubt that Microsoft's OpenAI instances would just immediately go away. And then there are other competitors out there, which actually brings us to another news story.
Okay.
So Claude from Anthropic is a competitor. You know, we couldn't take our prompts and just plug them right in with no changes and have them work. But in the middle of all this chaos, Anthropic did announce Claude 2.1, which
hey, you know all that crazy stuff that's going on over there at OpenAI? Yeah, well, come on over here and check out what we're doing. We're not crazy.
So yeah, we're not going to merge with you. And also, here's a press release we timed just right for this.
Yeah. It's like they were waiting for something to happen.
Maybe they actually seem to operate in that mode. One of the things I learned by reading that paper, one of the things that that Toner was praising is that they actually held off on launching. This seems really weird to me. It's hard to understand, but they held off on launching their version of ChatGPT, which is Claude.ai, until ChatGPT came out because they didn't want to push the field forward too fast.
Wow.
As an entrepreneur, hard to understand why you would do that.
Yeah, very.
But, you know, she goes into length about like, it's a shame that they didn't get credit for that because they were lost in the sauce. That's not her words, certainly. But yeah, you get lost in the sauce when you go second with something that's not quite as good.
So what are the features of Claude 2.1 that we should pay attention to?
Okay, a couple things. One big one is 200K context window, which is just, it strikes me as silly. Okay, so they had a 100K context window a couple of weeks ago at that big conference. GPT-4 got 128K. And now, so they one-upped Claude, and now Claude's like, well, 200K. And, you know, it's all the same thing where it's not really apples to apples with the lower tier token windows. It starts to break down somewhere in the middle. Although one thing they do say is that there's a 2x decrease in hallucinations, which maybe that note is meant to say that we're, you know, the large context is getting better. Also, they announced beta of API tool use.
What's that?
It's like function calling. Through their API, you'll be able to do something like function calling where it's easier to get it to actually call third-party tools right there from inside their system. Just the arms race with OpenAI because they have that. Also system prompts, which is old news for, you know, GPT-4 users. And this all powers their Claude.ai, which is their version of ChatGPT.
Okay.
So, that happened. And also OpenAI had an announcement right in the middle of this, which was really interesting because it came from somebody who had just quit, the president of OpenAI, which is not Sam Altman. It's a different person, but they just announced that ChatGPT will have free audio for everyone. So, you can talk to it. It'll talk to you. And apparently that's really good and a very different experience. So I haven't gone deep with that yet, but it sounds really good. I
can imagine that would be really good on a mobile device, on a phone.
Yeah.
You know, not necessarily sitting at my computer where I've got a big keyboard and I can type faster than I can speak.
Yep, exactly. I've heard from people who are driving around and talking to it and like they come up with a book outline on their way to work or whatever. Like it does sound like a really cool experience. I'm looking forward to playing with it more.
Wow.
So there's one other thing I wanted to cover on a much lighter note.
Okay.
So Charlie Holtz, who's a developer, there's a great Ars Technica article about this. He combined GPT-4 Vision and 11 Labs to clone the voice of David Attenborough. You know that
oh sure,
he's like a documentary, like a nature documentary guy.
Yeah, he's like the world, all the wildlife stuff. Yeah. Classic guy.
Yeah, like the Planet Earth type stuff. So
Planet Earth, yeah.
Basically, he's got his webcam pointed at himself and it's pulling out frames and passing them through this little GPT app that he made. And then it has the voice of David Attenborough narrating his behavior. So it's like, now the Homo sapiens engages in the ritual of water drinking. Truly his thirst is boundless. Observe his denim shirt.
It's so cool.
And it's really funny and good. And it's just watching him and talking about him all day as he's working.
I love the title of the website here, the web article. Unauthorized David Attenborough AI clone narrates developer's life, goes viral.
It's really funny. I mean, the voice is great. And like this specimen has curly brown hair.
Our parents got headlines like Truman wins, we have headlines like unauthorized David Attenborough AI clone narrates developer's life, goes viral. And everybody's like, wow. And we're living in these surreal times, my friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are living in interesting times.
Yeah.
That's the news.
We wish all our American friends to have a happy and safe Thanksgiving. And we will talk to you next week on the AI Bot Show.
All right.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye-bye.